us. We are going to be, of course, waiting in 5 minutes for everyone to jump into the call, as per usual. But don't mind us if you want to have a quick discussion in the 5 minutes. You want to talk about anything, anything, let us know. Otherwise, we will, of course, be picking up everything at 5 past.
Cool, no problem. We'll just we'll join you when you start up.
For future reference, we do need to figure out something for these 5 minutes, kind of like a bonus thing, like if you come in early, you catch something rather than dead air. I've been meaning to say that for weeks and I've also been come up with something that I haven't. It's been too busy.
What do you recommend?
I don't know, like a 5 minute sharing or something that's interesting right at the beginning, like a little personal story or something. You catch it, you don't, something like that. I don't know, quick gut thought.
Well, I did miss what you guys were talking about. You were saying, yeah, we really need to do this and we really need to discuss this and we really need to sort it out. And I'm going, what?
Teaser.
I came in early, but not early enough.
No, definitely. I'm going to bring it up just now, actually. I'll bring it up. It's just the need for someone to head up a little bit of communications for the project going forward. So that's it. But I'll talk a bit more about it just now. But I don't know, has anyone got something interesting from the world of screenwriting, filmmaking that they want to discuss? I mean, what can we talk about that's happened recently that's really interesting? I don't know, have you seen any films recently, both Kate and Gavin? What did you watch?
So I watched the new Bond. Can I talk about it without ruining it for anybody?
I think no spoilers.
Does
No
Bond
spoilers.
win?
Did you enjoy
Bond
it?
win?
Oh no, come on. That's the biggest spoiler.
What did you say, Gavin?
Well, given I said, does Bond win? I mean, it's I guess I'm saying you can't really spoil the Bond.
Yeah.
Full.
So what's very interesting is it feels to me like the Bond narrative is fully out of date now.
Yeah, look, I will tell you that I was talking to a fellow filmmaker who had seen it. He had said that it felt as if there was no director really. That's usually bad. There was no director. There's nothing to be said. It was just, it's the every Bond thing you can think of was thrown into it or something. I haven't seen it yet.
And also it starts off with one villain and then another villain becomes the villain. So that's like, what? And
the Spider-Man 3 problem.
Yeah, and then the whole thing of the threat against the world becomes, you start, anyway, I won't go into that too much. But
No, there's a term about that.
So then it's like what ends up happening is nature ends up being bombed in order to save humans. And right now with the whole seismic shell blasting, it just feels like, okay, this narrative is old and out of date, and we need to start narratives that are about, you don't sacrifice the world or the planet or the earth.
No. There's a known problem with that. There's no problem in storytelling where you create a human story that's dealing between two people and suddenly there's an escalation of stakes that far reach out of the scope of the story and you lose the audience immediately. So I'm pretty sure that happened. It's a problem in a lot of Bond films. They've only actually recently gotten it right twice. The rest of the time, it's just the stakes are so large, no one cares. And it's worse than that actually sometimes. You become so apathetic, you disconnect entirely from the film. That's the biggest problem with like those Marvel films, a lot of superhero films, you just disconnect.
They're so bombastic. The blows are coming so hard and so big that they lose all impact.
And that's why they call them amusement park rides.
Yeah, that's what they are, just adrenaline and audio and visual overload. So interesting because I don't really watch films, but I've really been enjoying American Gods season 3. Have you guys been watching that one at all?
I know the novel, and I've seen a little bit of the first season. So I'm surprised it got to season 3. Not that it's not good. I'm just surprised that it got the traction to get to season 3 because that was
getting epic. Yeah. Season, if you give it a go. I mean, Gaiman I think is pretty good. I don't know if you guys also checked the one he was doing with Terry Pratchett. The name escapes me at the moment. They're only on season 1, but also just so good.
Oh, Vicky, can we ask you to?
I'll do it.
Season. Okay, so what did you think about American Gods?
I think that they're very also profound. it started, was very patient storytelling. First season, it's kind of like there's a lot going, a lot of characters, a world that's very very rich, but you're sort of discovering it very slowly. And the same for the characters. And the arc of the protagonist does it's really epic. But it's not really it's actually a dual protagonist, because it is him and his wife, and the unity of the couple is initially, it's just so magnificently done, and they're kind of pushing to that idea of like it's a wholeness. And there's amazing spiritual and political themes, and it's very insightful and well written and well performed. I mean, well shot. It's in every which way. It's a great series, one of the best I've seen.
No, I'll definitely check it out. It was made initially by the same guys who created Hannibal, the TV series. So I'm looking forward to actually re-engaging with it as well. On that note, it is 5 past, actually 6 past now. Look, I think we will be talking to people as they come in. But basically, hi everyone. Thanks very much for coming through. This is, I think, the last session for the year itself before we pick up again next year. But I'm saying, hey everyone, thanks very much for coming through and having the time to actually spend some time with us. Now, look, we have gotten everyone confirmed at this point as to their participation in the bigger writers, the Writers Project. I think we're still going to come up with a name. But prior to that, of course, we do need everyone to send through their cell phone numbers to either myself or to Kate, or both in the same email, so that we can get you added to the Telegram group. That's for everyone who's confirmed their participation. If you haven't by now, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We will be moving forward, and we're looking forward to you guys engaging at some point or another within the program itself. So as part of that, with regards to communications going forward, we would want to put up our hand and say, look, we think that it's a great time for someone to volunteer to be a communications, I won't say expert, but someone to help us handle communications, handles, generally supporting that role for the group itself. Because of course, we're going to be going from here on out into different things like development and pre-prod and all those things. And it requires a lot of communication. And for just someone to handle the nitty-gritty of it. And I know that few people over here have, tons of experience and would like to actually, volunteer for that role. It won't be too hectic. It will be at the same pace as the project itself. So it'll still be a voluntary basis. We're not expecting you to overly commit time or effort to it. But it's small things like basically helping not set up, but rather keep the Telegram group going. If we do have ideas that need to be explored with the group itself, to quickly alert the group, quickly alert some kind of communication basis, and allow for spreading information. That's just part and parcel of what we want to do. And we just think that it would be fantastic if someone could volunteer their time for that, as we're all volunteering our time for the heading of the project itself. That's just a quick call, a quick notice. I will be coming back to it after we've gotten through the majority of what we want to talk about today, just to, whoever is part of the call. But if you want to have that role, or you think of anyone who would like to be a part of the project in that capacity, just give us a shout. You have my email, you have Gavin's email and Kate's email. Send us something. We'll definitely sit down and have a look at it together and figure out the way forward for that. So as you can see over here, we have everyone here today to talk about something that I think is really important going forward. And I don't think that it's just as a writer or a filmmaker or even as a director, but it's something that hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a very powerful tool for all of your projects going forward, not just the ones that we're going to be having as part of the Writers Project. And that is how to take an idea for a story and create an actual story idea. Now, story ideas are actually quite technical. They have different facets, different parts of them that have to be fully explored before you can say, yeah, here's a story that I can tell anyone in 30 seconds and try get funding for. And the biggest issue that we've had is, as writers in South Africa, as producers even, and everyone in between, we don't have many platforms to be able to pitch. And when I say pitch, I don't mean trying to get a pitch document together, but actually talking to people about an idea that you have and helping explore that idea into a way in which you could possibly get it shaped up for development or even production. We don't have that infrastructure. So The information that I will be talking about and what Gavin and Kate are going to be expressing their versions of and perhaps even supporting or challenging is information that I've gathered over the past couple of years, engaging on larger platforms, engaging with Europeans, Americans, and everyone in between to win funding, to put myself forward on projects, and to be sometimes even as a director on a project. So this information is something that I'm hoping you can all take away as useful tools for you dissecting your story ideas, for you generating story ideas, and for you assessing whether or not it's something you want to pursue before you decide to commit years worth of your life to developing it into a screenplay or into making it a film. So I will start with that, but I just want to quickly touch base with Gavin and Kate if there are any queries they have, and if they want to say anything before I jump into that idea. Okay, great. So for everyone who's here, thank you again for jumping into the call. Hopefully by this, you should be able to pitch Netflix or something. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it really is up to you. But more importantly, if you're able to take an idea and make a screenplay out of it, then I would have had my job done. So when I say story idea, I mean, of course, the nitty and gritty of what is happening in your story, who is it happening to, where is it happening, and why is it that you want to tell this story with this protagonist, with this set of events occurring. Now, that sounds like a very uncreative task. You're always going to say to yourself as a writer, I can just generate a story. But the reality is screenwriting is a technical craft merging with a creative craft. Filmmaking is a very technical craft to express art and form on the other. So we have to ask ourselves, is the story idea that we have something that's important, something that's vital, something that is necessary? And if all three of those things are just to yourself, can I then create something and talk to someone about it without having to spend an hour or two trying to explain an idea? So with regards to that idea, we always talk about, what do you want to say? What do you want to say in a screenplay? What do you want to say in a story? What do you want to say in a book or anything like that? What are you trying to give voice to? So some screenwriters start off with an idea. Some screenwriters start off with a character, something that is just a piece of dialogue, something that's an action or a scenario that opens up the possibility of your story. Whatever your story comes from, wherever it starts, understand that most of the time, if not all of the time, your story is going to have a focal point. And that focal point is usually your main character, a protagonist, if you want, or maybe a group of protagonists, if your story is that large. But more importantly, for the purposes of the project that we're going to be engaging with over the next coming months, if not year, is going to be narrowing down your story idea into one protagonist and maybe one or two other characters. But specifically your protagonist, this is your voice for your story. This is the person who you're going to have a bunch of stuff happen to, or a bunch of things they're going to react to, and the story is going to be expressed to them. Now, when I say protagonist, yes, there's the character, the characteristics and everything. But really what I'm talking about is, what do they need? What do they want? Why now? When is it going to happen? And if they are going to succeed or fail at their objective. Now, that's once again sounds uncreative, but really that's the meat and bones of story. That's the major reason why any audience member is watching something. They want to engage with someone's journey. They want to engage with someone either getting what they want or not getting what they want. And perhaps even if that's the case, getting what they actually need. And that's the kind of thing that draws everyone to storytelling. And you can usually feel when you get cheated out of those things, when you get cheated out of a character that's not looking for anything, that you feel a dissatisfaction towards the story itself. So whenever we talk about story ideas, it is about a person or a group of people looking for something to do, looking for something to gain, and what is standing in their way. Now, is it something that's external to them, or is it something that's internal to them? A good story idea has both of those elements. It has something that's exterior to the character and something that's interior to the character that's blocking their way to getting what they want, to getting what they need, really. Now, I'm going to start speaking specifically about wants versus needs, but I'm going to talk to them in the idea of what is this person aiming for? And what do they need to do to get to that thing? And is that thing something that they need, or is that thing something that they want? Now, we all know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We all know about, wants and needs and goals and desires and all those things. But specifically, if we talk about a story about, a group of people, let me just clarify that, a bartender who's talking to his customer, it's closing time, and then a young boy walks into the room. Now, that young boy perhaps is the son of one of the two individuals inside there. And that young boy wants to go home, but can't without that individual. Now, he wants to go home. He needs to go home, in fact. But in doing so, he has to confront adults, right? Now, both of those adults have a great time in a room. They don't want to be removed from that room. So they're going to fight against it. Now you have the idea of a story taking place, where you have someone wanting or needing something, and you have obstacles to that. Now, storytelling is all about what is your character, what is your protagonist going to do to get that thing done? And if they don't get the thing done, what does that mean for them? What does failure look like for them? So if we go back to our protagonist, every single story idea has a person, and they have an objective, and they have an interior journey or an exterior journey element to them, either achieving that objective or failing to achieve that objective. Now, when we think of our very big stories, our very big adventure and superhero stories and so forth, the external journey is very much the priority of that story. So we think of any big superhero film, Batman. Let's talk about The Dark Knight, for example. The Dark Knight, he's going up against a guy who wants to blow up the city, right? Now, the objective for Batman is very external to Batman's journey, to Batman's psyche, his character, and everything. So he needs to stop a physical danger from occurring. Now, a good story is that physical journey, that physical objective, that physical danger being intimately tied to who Batman is, and Batman having to overcome an aspect of himself, whether it is a failure, a flaw, or whether it is a fear in confronting that danger so that he can actually save the day. Or she, doesn't matter who it is. At the end of the day, it's all about that external journey meeting that interior journey. So that interior journey is something we like to call as growth. Maybe your character needs to grow in some way. Maybe they need to learn a very important lesson, or maybe they fail to grow, and that's the story. That then becomes a tragic story, or it becomes a story of failure of some kind. So a good story idea is expressing a character trying to get what they want or what they need, and that journey to get to that point is confronted by obstacles, which then match what they need to do in terms of an exterior journey and an interior journey. And an exterior journey could be a literal physical plot thing. So something is physically standing in their way. If we go back to the story about the bar and the two adults at the bar, and then this kid that walks in, one of the guys is his friend. One of the guys is his father, and his father's talking to his friend. The actual obstacle that's present for this young boy is the friend. He has to somehow convince both his father and his father's friend that going home for him is the right thing to do. Now, I've given an example of a big superhero film, which is generally what you normally get for your big action adventure, even some big action adventure hiding in different other genres, such as sci-fi or fantasy, or even thriller. You're always going to have an external force that's standing in the way of your protagonist. Now, when we talk about very nuanced stories, so nuance being expressions of character, expressions of the internal dilemma, the internal struggle, we now start talking about an interior journey that's taking precedence of an exterior force. So what's happening inside a character is actually more important than what's happening outside of the character. And what's happening outside the character then becomes a manifestation of that internal drama, that internal turmoil, things that the character does to face their will, to face some kind of crisis, are primarily motivated by the turmoil happening within the character. And if you think of Macbeth, for example, in fact, a lot of Shakespeare stories are very much that interior journey causing chaos in the exterior journey. So if you think of Macbeth, Macbeth is someone who could be a very, 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 very powerful person, but he lets that idea define how he wants to tackle the world. And he could be, but he has good values, he has good morals, he's a good leader. Until, of course, the witches come to him and seed the idea that he could become king one day. Now, that ambition has never been met before by the possibility of something like that happening. But once that seed is there, he becomes obsessed by it. He goes so far as killing the actual king, the king who is nobly being placed onto the crown, nobly placed into his throne, and then usurps the crown for himself. But he can't stop at that point. He keeps on going. He will do anything to satisfy his position, anything to satisfy his ambition of being powerful, of being the leader. And he goes to the maximum, in fact, where even confronted with absolute outright failure, he still faces that end, being ambitious, being proud, and being unrepentant of his journey. We call that a tragedy. So if you have a character whose interior journey is to grow, is to learn something, and they refuse to, and as a result, they lose everything around them, that's what happens in tragedies. But if you find a character who actually does grow, who actually recognizes that, or he or she recognizes that they are in danger, that this world around them is collapsing, and they need to change something within themselves to match the challenge, then we may have a very positive story. But sometimes you have stories where even that happens, even when the guy gets the sword, or the lady gets the tools needed to confront patriarchy, even then they still fail. So it's, as you can imagine, there is a mixture of stories that you can come up with. There is an entire range of possibilities. But if you keep at the very core ideas of story idea in your mind, that is protagonist, what do they need? I'm sorry, what do they desire? And what is in their way to what they desire? Is it an external force or is it an internal force? And maybe it is a bit of both. And is that a want or a need that they desire? And are those two things tied together? And maybe that person needs to sacrifice their wants to get what they truly need, to get what they truly need on the inside to be able to match the exterior force. Or in failing to do that, they completely destroy the world around them. So this can apply to any genre, which means that genre itself is really just a collection of tropes, a collection of expression of ideas. But at the end of the day, the major crux to your story is who being your protagonist, what do they desire, what are they aiming for, where is this thing happening, and why is your protagonist going for that thing? And then the critical element to that is what is in their way, and what will they be ready to give up to get what they need, to get what they desire. Now, I'm going to just run through a couple of major films that we know of, just to help solidify this idea, just to help solidify this mindset. I've already spoken about Macbeth. It can equally apply to Hamlet. Hamlet, I don't know if anyone has ever engaged with Hamlet over here, but Hamlet's a well-known story. It's the story of the Prince of Denmark who finds out that his father was actually murdered. And his father's murderer is actually now he's sitting on the throne. He has usurped the crown. He has married his mother. But Hamlet, instead of actually fighting immediately, instead of actually going to avenge his father's killer, who happens to be his uncle, he sits in inaction. He sits in over-contemplation. He overthinks everything. And as a result, he stalls. And in that stalling of time, and that in him working himself up internally, disaster happens. Because when he does act, he acts the last second, and it is the wrong time to act, resulting in everyone dying. That's a common trope in Shakespeare, as you can imagine. But let's think of one of the most popular films of all time, The Godfather. So The Godfather, both the first film and the sequels, are about Michael Corleone. Now, Michael Corleone has to overcome his desire to be a model American citizen, a normal person, someone who's law-abiding, someone who's actually, a good, upstanding person. He has to overcome that and embrace his true path of violence and power to save his family. So that's something that has been set up for him before, but it really came down to Michael choosing whether or not he was going to actually become this person who has the power to inflict violence on his enemies and protect his family. Well, he does. And in doing so, he sacrifices that wanted to be a model American citizen to embrace the need to protect his family. And that's the first Godfather film. And the second Godfather film that gets flipped around, because that very same need, that very same true path of his in becoming a gangster, in becoming not only a gangster, but a very powerful gangster, leads to him destroying his family, leads to him going too far in protecting his family, which then, in fact, results, I don't know if anyone's seen The Godfather here, but if you haven't, I'm sorry, I'm going to be spoiling this for you, which then results in a death in the family, which he is directly responsible for. And as a result, Michael becomes the villain of his own story. Michael becomes very much the person who, in embracing his true path too closely, has gone and done the worst thing and has actually sacrificed the family that he had once swore to protect. So that is, of course, The Godfather. And The Godfather is known to be a heroic and a tragic story at the same time. So knowing those ideas, knowing those basic elements of story idea, it's quite clear you can have an infinite amount of exploration to do. So long as you keep to the major golden rule of saying, okay, this is a story about someone, and this is a story about someone wanting to do something or wanting to become something, and either they do it or they don't. And if they do, it's a great story, it's a happy ending. But if they don't, then is that a tragedy? Is that something that maybe they need to reflect on, they need to learn from? So that's story ideas in a nutshell, story design really in a nutshell. And so long as you keep these basic elements and you try to find out what a possible interior journey and an exterior journey you can apply to this person achieving their desires or not, there is quite a lot you can do from plot side. And now that goes into the idea of structure. If you go into any one of these major books that have been awarded across the board for structure, for story, you've got Robert McKee's story, you've got Save the Cat, you have a lot of these, all of them deal with the same idea. The same idea is finding out who your character is, finding out what they want, what they desire, what are they willing to give up for that, and producing a structure that fits that. Are we going to punish them? Are we going to punish them for a bit of time and then maybe say, all right, now you've learned your lesson, face the villain, face this, face that, and are they going to succeed as a result? Structure, all of that is informed by your character motivations and what is this person willing to give up. So you can read as many books as you want, but as long as you've got these key ideas, you can express stories that have never been seen before. And when I say that, I mean, of course, story is universal. Many stories basically you're re-expressing ideas the whole time, but the way in which that story takes place, the flavor of it, the shape of it could be very unique to the purposes you want. I think that's what I wanted to say within I think it's 15 minutes or so. I'm hoping that with those two examples, I can also list a few other examples if you want, if anyone needs them, that as long as you keep these ideas in mind, going from here on out, as you're addressing your story ideas, we're talking about producing maybe 2 or 3 story ideas that you want to take forward as your own script for your film. If you can think of a germ of an idea and then attack it with those questions and produce some kind of form that you can say, oh yeah, now I understand what needs to happen to this character for this character to tell, for this character to achieve something or not achieve something. That's what we're expecting in the conversation that we'll be having sometime in January with your story ideas. That's what we'll be talking about, those elements. Everything else is flavored to that. Everything else is, excitement. Maybe you're dealing with a character who is overcoming some major truth in their family. And as a result of doing that, they grow massively. Well, we still need to see some basic elements to that story that express that journey. And hopefully we're able to, from that point on, develop that and express it in the best possible cinematic way. That's it from my side, Gavin.
Thank you for that, Thabiso. Okay, so from my side, I really just want to bring the concept into our project itself. So I think Thabiso did a great job in terms of outlining the general overview of what story design needs to contain. I just want to talk for a moment about the concept itself. What does story design really mean and why is it so important? Because it's not really something that's touched on. I mean, a lot of what Thabiso's talking about also often it gets covered under story structure and in those books that he mentioned, like McKee's story and so on. But practically, the biggest question I think that we as writers often face when we come up with an idea is just, will it work? you know, is this really going to be, does this idea work as a story, or do I have a snapshot of a character, or do I have a piece of a story but not really a story? And knowing when you really have a story and whether that will be a compelling story is really important, because, you know, if you can't tell from your idea whether that'll work or not, you are bound to waste lots of time and often get quite frustrated and go through drafts that never work because the story itself didn't have some of those elements that Tobias was talking about. You know, there was no clear objective. The inner conflict, the theme of the film is not there. Theme is something that generally writers really master late in their journey. It really is the difference between a journeyman and someone who actually has mastered the craft, is really understanding theme and how to work with it. But a story itself is often, you know, a very intuitive process. So sometimes you're not going to figure out that theme until you're deep into an idea and have been working with it a while. Sometimes, you know, you can start with the theme, but then you kind of create an artificial story that's not really coming, you know, from the heart. And everyone just kind of has to, you know, with practice and time, kind of find out, you know, their own process and work with it. When it comes to low budget storytelling, particularly, that's where, you know, knowing these things is so important, because it's much easier to write a high budget thing with, you know, lots of effects and big plot lines and things that will keep an audience compelled than it is to bring it into one location, as we're trying to do, and still keep them compelled. So, you know, trying to figure that out is also really where I wanted to speak. And if you look at a lot of like one location kind of films, and I'll use Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs as a great example, because that was one of the first ones where I was like, okay, this is what I have to do, and this is a good way to do it. And often what you find is that the question is, what moment do we bring the audience into? You know, where do we meet the characters? Because mostly all of these are going to be like a play, and they're going to be driven by the interpersonal dynamics of the characters and what they're up to. And certainly their internal dynamics, but also just concretely, it's going to be about the characters. So you generally need to meet the characters at a place either of crisis or however it is, it's a powerful place that we come in and already, once you've set up, and it needs to be set up also quite easily, 2-3 minutes in a 22-minute film. You know, are we meeting in a place where we're like, okay, I want to stick around for the next 20 minutes because this is interesting and I'm going to be with them and watch them go through this 20 minutes. So, you know, a show is a showing. And what is it that you are showing the audience that's going to keep them interested for 20 minutes? This is firstly, you know, the question you need to ask, you know, is it just going to be, you know, some character kind of going through an internal journey? And if so, how am I going to sell that to an audience? How is that going to be compelling enough visually and otherwise to keep them gripped? You know, these are the questions you kind of need to ask yourself. You know, why will someone stay watching this, given all the competition for their attention between, you know, news and games and entertainment and other films and so on? Why will they stick with me? And I will quickly flip, because I've started to design my own story, and I'll share with you a bit of my preliminary design to show you both how I design and also to speak to that general thing of how do we design these ones so that they are compelling. Before I do that, I also just wanted to, sorry, my thoughts popped out. Okay, let me do that. So please, this is very, very preliminary. I think like many people at the moment have been absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of stuff going at me. So what you see is basically like first thought, completely first thought. I've also begun a structural synopsis that I'll show you, like a first act for approach. But this is very first thought. I haven't finished the structural synopsis. This is like really just stream of conscious, so I could have some sort of example. Now, partly in my story, in some ways, I might be breaking the rules. I'm not sure yet, because I haven't really gone enough into my story to know whether certain things will emerge and then I can play with them, or whether I am just kind of breaking the rules. I began this story, again, it's a story that happened to me. So partly what I'm showing is like kind of a world that I know that most people aren't familiar with. And in that sense, it could be compelling. I'm also was looking at, you know, what are the key components that I have that are worth seeing? What can I utilize, you know, even without budget? So there I have to turn into my own personal networks and, what I've got available that I can put in front of a camera to show people that they could be interested in. Now, one of the main things I have is I have music. I have a lot of people in my networks who are really amazing musicians, of the kind that people don't see. So music's been a huge part of my life. I also play music, and it's something I know well. I know how to use music. But again, because I have the people that I wanted that to be a driver. Like I've got lots of ideas for shows that involve music because it's something, if I need someone I can just get and I don't have to pay them because they're good friends and we'll have fun together. And they also want to get out there and it's a way we can support each other. One of my main allies is one of my closest friends, and it's a guy named Davide, which is Czech for David. And Dave is both a master actor and a master musician. So he features in a lot of my low budget ideas because he will, one, give me a soundtrack, but also he is an excellent actor and compelling enough to drive a 20-minute or a feature basically on his own. He plays more instruments than I can name, many indigenous from like across Africa and Australia and South America, as well as guitar and violin and anything. He's been at it. I've seen him play pool pipe in a way that'll blow your mind. So I wrote Dave in because I know I've got him. And then either I can play the one role, which doesn't require much acting, or I'll find someone to do it. And the other role also I could use my ex Hannah, who the thing's based on, who also has an ability to act, or I can call in a friend. But I know that I'm sitting in Sjöbrock, which is far from anyone. So when I started with elements that I know at the very least I can make this film. Like whatever happens, I have everything I need, and all I need is the camera, and I'm good. Some basic equipment, which I know in my network, so I can rustle up very easily. And then I went to a story that is both contained and interesting. So when we design story, we also have to remember that a screenplay is a technical document, it is a business document, and it is a story. And it has to work on all those levels. When I'm writing for a reader, I'm writing for a producer, I'm writing for my actors and the whole technical teams. And at the same time, generally would have to sell it to someone. So all these considerations need to be there as you kind of think about your idea, but we are shortcutting and making it much easier for ourselves because we don't have to sell it. So we're not writing for it to get past a reader. And we're not writing for anyone but ourselves, really. And because of the COVID theme, we have placed our stories within the context of high stakes, because the stakes in that contained environment is what's important. That partly creates the tension. So like if you look at Reservoir Dogs, you come in immediately, I think it's the first shot, sorry, names are so out of my head at the moment, but it's the character is bleeding, he's been gut shot. We know stuff's gone down. As soon as we get to this warehouse, the stakes and the tension's already high. Something's gone wrong. We don't know if the police are coming. We don't know if we've been betrayed. We don't know anything, but we know we have to sit here and be here, and everyone's going to meet here, and that's what we have to do. So immediately, all these questions are raised. The stakes are high. The tension's high. So within your COVID world, you need to find that moment where stakes are high and tensions are high. Ideally, because also there's no real rules. That works. That if a audience comes in, stakes are high, tensions are high, that works. If you want to do like a much more arty sort of thing, you will have to find your way to ensure that you hold the audience's attention and thing. And it becomes a little bit more challenging if it's not just about meeting people in a moment where they need something and it's got to happen here now. So when you kind of conceive an idea, you want to write a log line that kind of says to you, what are the objectives, what are the stakes, what's the basic idea. Writing a log line is quite a tool and a skill of itself. If you go to the Inktip site, they've got a tool called a log line generator. And there's very standard ways in Hollywood that you write a log line. They can't be more than 700 characters. And there's one for story-driven films and there's one for character-driven films. And they explain what the difference is. And then they just give you these little boxes. And while you're learning, it's like a very helpful way because it just basically says, these are the main elements you need to have, and if you plug them in, you'll get the standard formula that the whole industry really works with. Because they're also, if they don't see a log line that's kind of in that formula and has that information, they're like, okay, this person doesn't know what they're doing. And they just read, like, and for many producers are just going through log lines, deciding on their project. It's one of the ways you'll just get filtered in or out. So this is what I came up with. It's very preliminary, and I'll point out why I'm still not, why I'm still finding my story. So when I'm calling it the bifurcation of reality, it's maybe a working title. Let's keep it there. But the idea is that when COVID hit, essentially we had a status quo in this world that stopped, and it produced a choice point for humanity. We're going one way or another, and some people went one way and some people went another, and we're still kind of figuring it out. And there's a spiritual theme here, and it's about a spiritual war and how it plays out in material reality, and bring it into the COVID situation. So many people look at these people and these ideas and go, that in itself is crazy. So it's COVID craziness. Otherwise, it's just the general craziness of the situation as these characters see it. And it is just these characters. So when the first hard COVID lockdown is imposed, Davide and Hannah, a shamanic couple, invite Davide's best friend Kai, a fellow shaman, to take refuge with them. Davide has always been pained by the fact that Kai and Hannah have never been able to get along, but knowing the nature of the spiritual war driving global events, he requests they put their differences aside to weave magic with him in support of the highest outcome for humanity. So in doing this, I'm introducing the characters and giving you some understanding of their world. So that's why I use words like shamanic. I've used the character names. Often that's like a no-no with log lines. I'm being a bit lazy, it's first thought. Because generally you want to kind of just talk about the type of character they are. But this is also me writing for myself. So partly I'm putting in the problem, which is just that they don't get on. Dave's desire, his objective is to bring peace between like his best friend and his lady. The obstacle, which isn't quite clear yet in the log line, is that Kai, wasn't giving her a chance, essentially. And then somewhere I've also kind of got the theme here, which is, that this is a spiritual war and kind of the nature of good and evil. And as much as I can, I'm going to bring that into a very contained film. It's big themes for a 22-minute thing. I'm just going to start because you'll see I got to about Act 2 beginning, and most of my Act 2 will be driven by a showing of what deep ceremony looks like when it comes to like shamanic ceremony. So a lot of things when I see like in Hollywood films have not been depicted properly. There is what I would call a war on consciousness. And very often, if you see a spiritual character, if you see a shamanic character, if you see like ceremony as depicted in those films, it's mockery. These are idiots, space cadets, they're not really real people of real substance. The truth is very different. So many of the most personally, like energetically powerful of people met are sangomas or shamans of one sort or another. And they often are very highly capable people who also have a lot of other things going on in their life. So I start and I'm breaking up partly by time. I know I'm aiming at 22 minutes. And as I go, I'm kind of wanting to make sure that the beats are going to fit my ultimate length. I do know that most of my second act will be ceremony. It's going to be music. It's going to be then dancing, singing, praying, sharing. The point of the second act will be to get them to a place of unity. And somewhere along the line, I have to have, those beats of discord that allows me to show the journey of them coming together, which they are going to do through the music and through the dance and through the shared experience of going through this trauma together. I'm not going to get into detail. I'm saying I'm running out of time, but very basically, I'm looking at the basic things. I know my first setup will be, I have to set up that Kai needs to come and that there's been this tension and difference between them. Very simple. Then Dave goes on a hike because I started with this image of him in the hills as the siren goes off and there's emptiness around him, but he kind of just like lets out a war cry. It's like I wanted to start teasing the audience and like that there's something going on here, something that also brings into that theme of the spiritual war. It comes back, Kai's arrived. It's Dave's birthday. they're going to have ceremony. That's the crossing over. They agree. Also set up that he's been gifted lots of medicines in the weeks before. And when you get into it, the crossing over is they're about to take a whole bunch of medicine. They've got ayahuasca there, iboga, San Pedro, bunch of stuff, and they're going to just get into it. And for those people who don't know this world, they'd be surprised by what's going to come next. I do know when I get into Act 2 that the music is visceral. I like music because the energy is always very clear and present. When you hear something, you know what it is. Your whole body feels it. It ripples through you. There's no mistaking it. That's why I like music to drive experience for the audience. It's very powerful. And I know I have one of the most powerful musicians on my planet doing this for me. So as soon as you hear the type of music that comes out, it can drive 10 minutes of story, and it can do it well. I know that. And I know that 10 minutes will be what I need to frame the rest. And then I'm going to kind of conclude it. And I hope that's like kind of a helpful way to like a practical approach. And I'll leave it there because I'm out of time.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks. Really appreciate the multi-layered approach to exploring your story ideas. I just wanted to just quickly show 3 examples of log lines, because that's what we're actually asking you to think about over the December break. I really want you guys to, at this point, really start digesting the ideas that you have for the possible stories you want within this project, and to start coming up with 1 or 2 or 3 story ideas that you can put down into a log line. Now, a log line is actually a really important thing. It's your story in a nutshell. It's your 30-second description of your story, and you should be able to get a very good idea, a very good sense of what's happening and who is it happening to. And from there, you should be able to develop something, right? And really, that's what any producer or any partner or financier wants to know. What is your story? When they ask that, they mean that. But it could be that you want to have a much longer discussion. But in terms of what log lines, Gavin, can you just enable screen sharing for me? In terms of,
sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. In terms of log lines, they don't need to be this formidable, series of it's this, that. You could be someone who, as Gavin has mentioned, tries that tool out with the log line tool, and tries to explore the possibilities for an interior journey story or an exterior journey story. Now, I like to, to come up with ideas in this format. And if I can think of something that I want to watch that I think is interesting and I tell it to someone, then I've got something that I can actually, go forward and making a story. But sometimes it's not as clear. Maybe you're talking to someone who has no idea about story. But generally, that's usually the best person to talk to about your story. Because if they're not getting it, then you have to go back and try to figure out, is this the right story for them? So I've got over here 3 different log lines. The first one is from a very, very famous film. But I'm not going to say the film first. I want you just to, I'm going to read it out to you, and then I want you to have it in your mind. So the first one is, and this is of course based in America with the jury system. A dissenting juror in a murder trial slowly managed to convince others that the case is not as obviously clear as it seemed in court. So this is from a very famous film, and it's a one location film. And let me tell you, if you see this film, you'll be shocked as to how many twists and turns happen. But they're not twists and turns of, hey, someone stabbed someone or whatever. It's literally just as people with their very, very strong opinions of life finally come to terms with the fact they don't have all the facts of this case, and change, rapidly change. Not rapidly sometimes, sometimes it's rapid change, other times it's hard fought change. And all of these things come together in one hell of a climax. So if you want story in a nutshell, if you want what's possible within one room, I want you guys to watch 12 Angry Men. 12 Angry Men, Sidney Lumet. It's a remake, actually, of the previous film. If I remember correctly, it's Henry Fonda who acts in the main role, but really it's an ensemble piece. It is a beautiful film. I recommend that every single person here engages with, see what is possible within one location. Another film that you guys should watch is Locke. One location film, one character. It's really an incredible film. It shows you what's possible. I won't tell you what Locke is about if I had to tell you it was for the entire film. So you should definitely watch it. Now, keeping in mind with the possibilities of this project and this the theme that we've outlined in the previous sessions, we're talking about people who are stuck together in a space of place, in a place and dealing with something. Now, we've all experienced that. We've all experienced something like that right now. So we should be able to speak to something that's true to us, that's true to something that's important to us. So from my perspective, from what I deal with three major themes: family, identity, and social division. Those are the only themes I really tackle, but I tackle them across different genres, different mediums. And most importantly, I do that with all of my forms. So I just came up with these ideas right now. One I have been talking to Gavin and Kate about for a while, but the other I just made up right now, just keeping in mind what is the possibilities of a protagonist, what do they want, and what is the journey for that person to get to that point. So very quickly, I've got the first one. A couple who lost their child to illness during a pandemic must learn to connect again as they prepare to step back out into the world at the end of lockdown. So obviously it's a very intense story. Many different things are happening, but the most important thing is they want to get out back into the world again. They want to walk together in a park or things like that. And it's time forced. They have to, the world's opening up again. But the most important thing that they need to do is to reconnect after this massive trauma has happened. The second log line or story idea, if you want, is a prodigal son returning back home from overseas finds himself stuck with his racist family with his African girlfriend. So I just wrote that right now, but you get the idea. Whom he intends on proposing to, but she demands that his family accepts her first. So it's obviously a comedy. It's a dramatic comedy. There's very much this guy who needs to confront his family because he wants to marry his girlfriend. But his girlfriend has added that amazing, I don't want to say amazing because it sounds terrible coming from me because I came up with the idea, but add the compelling condition on him being married and that his family needs to accept it first. So what is he going to do? How's he going to do it? Can it be told in a 22-minute film? I don't think so. So I know it's definitely a 90 minutes to 120-minute film. So I had to come back to this idea and shape it back down so that it can be fit into a 22-minute film. If that's my goal, it could be that the first one is actually more compelling to me than the second one, which means that I'd want to take this up and put it into a feature film, if that's what I want to do. But the idea is that from here on out until early January, I want everyone to be thinking of an idea, thinking of a germ, thinking of something that's ironic. Really, the most ironic proverbs, the most ironic sayings and so forth are gold mines for story ideas. So think of something ironic, think of something that you want to say, and then try to attach a person to it. Maybe it's something that you want to talk about. Maybe it's something that a life experience has happened to you, and you want to express it in the form of a story. Once you do that, find out, okay, this person that I'm nominated to be my voice, what is that person's desire? What's standing in their way? And what do they need to learn? What do they need to grow to get to that? And if they aren't going to learn, if they aren't going to grow, if there is a story about failure, what does that failure look like? Is it failure of the heart, or is it physical, obvious failure in front of them? Maybe they don't get the thing, maybe they die. That's all I'm asking you guys to think about, and try to come up with 2 or 3 ideas that speak to you and put them to the test. We're asking you to do that for yourself, because that's how you come up with ideas. That's how you come up with story ideas. And that's really how you, start the journey of being a storyteller across the board. Okay, so Gavin, I think I've stepped over everyone else's time as well. I don't know if you want to add anything. Kate, would you like to say something? Would you like to talk about something that you'd like to add? And then if we're good to go, I would love to have everyone start talking about what they've experienced here, what they've learned about, and if they have any questions and answers about themselves going forward. But Kate.
Gavin, do you want to follow up with
Do you have any comments? Do you have anything you want to
add? Okay, so I want. Remember what we said before that I'd also share my story, but I don't know if I should. So that's what I wanted to just ask.
Yeah, that could be perfect. You could be in a position if you want to. Yeah, we could have a look at it and start applying some of the ideas that we've been talking about over here to help you unpack your story and to make it stronger if possible.
Okay, so you were saying like, what is that? Look for that like proverb or that saying or that thing. So I haven't found the perfect way of encapsulating it, but basically it's an idea of, how in life we say, oh, if only this opportunity happened, I'd finally make it. Or if only that happened, then everything would be perfect. But also like that whole idea of you're always saying because the situation isn't ideal, it's your excuse for not succeeding in the now. So what do you do when you are finally given that opportunity that you're always saying, if this happens, then. So basically a frustrated artist loses their full-time job and so this isn't in lockdown, so they lose their full-time job and then they're contacted by a very important gallery and they're offered a solo exhibition. And so now they'll have to face their excuses and find out what it is they have to express and say. Or it's that whole idea of like, I know so many people are like, oh, I would be an artist, or I would be a musician, or I would be an actor or a writer if only this happened. So this is this character story. She's been saying that now she is offered the opportunity, and she has to go through that whole creative process where you have to grow up, and you have to face that inspiration or the muse isn't always going to come for you, and you've got to actually pursue the muse yourself, and you've actually got to be disciplined. That creativity is a discipline. It's not just so it's where Gavin was talking about his story being very music, mine's going to be very visual. My background is I trained in fine art before training in screenwriting, and in terms of having a location, so our house is filled with artworks, and we have a painting studio and a printmaking studio. And the part of the story is that my husband has been putting off finishing a body of paintings for years now because he doesn't want to deal with selling them through a solo exhibition. He doesn't want to actually face it. So this is like, totally a mirror to him. Anyway, so we've got a studio full of beautiful unfinished paintings, but I've got a very powerful actor, a female actor who will play the role of being blocked, and now she has to finishing the paintings. And if you finish them and they're not good enough, then what is your excuse? So it'll be first act will be her trying to avoid doing the work and running away from it and doing everything she can to avoid it. Second act will be entering into the world of so she's going to sort of basically enter into her art world, into this sort of subconscious realm, to go and retrieve her vision, her message, and bring it out. And the third act will be bringing it into the world. So it's going to be very visual, and it's inspired by, very heavily inspired by Jan Svankmajer, who, when I first saw his films, it was like this guy had put a camera inside my brain and inside my dreams. And I've always wanted to do a tribute back to Jan Svankmajer of like, hey, dude, you think just like I do, or like you brought to life the way I see the world, or where I have things going on in my head. So I want to, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity because it's going to allow me to do something very experimental and to play. And I'm going to be using a lot of stop motion art making processes. So it's going to be, so I'm moving from where I've been working in story in very strict ways and very, the hero's journey, very much the Hollywood model. I'm now going to be entering into a far more experimental realm, and I'm going to be pushing myself to face my own fears and to become experimental and creative, and with how I show myself on screen. So I'm using this process to do that. And it's because when we were in COVID, most of my friends who are creatives found that they couldn't create. And so it's going to be exploring that aspect of, and the reality is, if she doesn't, so the stakes are, if she doesn't complete the work, if she doesn't find something new to say, she will lose this opportunity to have the solo exhibition, and she will also have to face that truth for herself that she is not the artist she believes in, or she will have to rise to the occasion and finally embrace that she is the artist she dreams of being. So that's it.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you very much for sharing that. Thanks for also, giving us the background to it as well. I think that's I think it's cool. I think it's an interesting idea, but I do have questions that I hope you don't mind me asking. I do have questions and interrogative questions and hopefully constructive questions. But before I get into them, Gavin, would you like to say anything to Kevin? Katie's given.
No, I'll wait. I've got to say some other stuff.
All right, all right. So I'll be quick about these, but hopefully these are questions that if you can't answer them now, you can digest them and go forward with. So you've given me the stakes, right? The stakes are, of course, if she doesn't get this, opportunity to exhibit her art, then it's
She doesn't finish the work. She doesn't do the work. She screwed her opportunity over.
She screwed her opportunity over. Right now, why is that the worst thing in the world for her?
Because it's an ideal, it's a dream she's had about herself. So she's either got to make the dream a reality or face that the dream was false.
Right. Now the reason why I asked it is because she
And
could
also
fail at that.
it's financial. She's lost her real full-time job.
Right.
So now-
Okay, so do you mind just muting Mo for a second? Yeah. Look, the reason why I asked this is if it's a financial burden, if it's a financial thing, then there is probably an element of danger that needs to be added in. If she doesn't get this opportunity made, if she doesn't have this opportunity to sell art and so forth, is there a possibility she might lose something that's very dear to her, that's closely tied to her having money? Is it that she might lose her space? Is it that she might be thrown onto the streets? Or is it that, she is going to perhaps renege on settling some debt or something? Think about that. I want you to consider that, because that makes that her winning, right? Her selling her art, it makes it that much more impactful, because that becomes an exterior thing that you can then match a sense of urgency for her overcoming her interior, her inner, lack of maybe of confidence, or perhaps that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about. But you get what I'm saying, and really that's something I want you to consider. Think of the most pressing way of showing that she needs this, because currently it's a want. I mean, it's a want. If she, like for me, the way I'm reading it, even if she,
it's an external reality as well. If she doesn't do the solo and work doesn't come up otherwise, she will be in extreme financial crisis.
the question really I'm asking is, what does failure look like? That's the thing. She might be, it might be she loses her home, or maybe she's dying or something. But the point of it is that what does failure look like in her world, and really amping up the stakes as a result. Because if it's just an internal question of her satisfying, oh, this is my opportunity to be an artist, yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think you'd probably be better off writing in a book than a film, because then you'll have the time and latitude to explore it. But with 22 minutes, you have to present something that is quite urgent, even if it's an ephemeral idea, So the idea is that she's going to fail in herself. She will fail in her heart and fail in her life's ambition. But if you can attach that to something that's external, great. And I would recommend actually that you don't attach it to the financial need. I would say that there is something quite bigger than that. That is a sense of failure. Now, that could be something that's super personal to her. That could be something that maybe her son's respect, if she has children, or a family member's respect, or something like that. Think of the possibilities. Expand it a bit if you can. The reason why I say that is because it's easy to go for the financial thing. It's easy to go with she might lose her house and so forth, but maybe there's an opportunity for a much deeper story to be unfolded. And really, if for exploring that, I would actually ask you, what's been stopping her from doing this the whole time? What's been stopping her from exploring art?
Fear of failure. So it's just self-respect as well that she will lose it.
Then maybe externalizing that lack of self-respect in the trying to get the respect of someone else who is critical to her life might be another option to explore. Maybe she's always been a failure to someone, and that person's been failing, and now this is the one opportunity she has to show success to both of them. And maybe that's the thing that they need, more than anything else. But it could be financial, could be this, but you get what I'm saying, right? The possibilities are almost endless over there. And is she afraid of something? What is she really afraid of?
Both, the fear is both fear of failure and fear of success. And it's ultimately a fear of growing up.
Okay, that's great. Then now you see that question, explore it. Why is she afraid of growing up? Explore that avenue, because there might be another layer to the story that's sitting in between that art competition and that art exhibition and her motivating herself to actually say, yes, I'm going to do this. There might be something, there's another layer that might be explored. Look, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all the queries I have. If you can do that at this stage, at the story idea stage, at the logline stage, you have a great chance of developing something that will express itself as you develop the story. So I would say, yes, it's easy to go for the financial thing, but think deeper. You might find something that's stronger and tied to it. That lack of self-respect is really cool. I like that. We should try and mine that for something, and maybe have as emblematic with another person being there. Anyway, that's my comments. Those are my comments.
Thanks. No, I appreciate it. I don't have the answers to all of those yet.
You don't have to have the answers now. Don't be,
Part of exploration.
yeah.
And yeah, I'm curious also just to see your execution, because I do see the elements in that. I'm just curious where your process takes you. And I'll also just add one thing, which is often that fear of success is fear of your own power. It comes to the
Yes.
kind of the more fundamental.
Yeah.
But as we're running out of time, let me just quickly say the two things I really need to say, and then I'll pass off. One, I am making myself available next week in certain slots for consultation times if anyone wants to bounce initial ideas with me. But I will send around an email for those not here. But first come, first serve. So if you're on the call, so it's Tuesday 14th, Wednesday 15th, Thursday 16th. I'll make myself available between 10 and 2, and then again between 3 and 5. And as I said, first come, first serve. Just email me your preferred times, or ideally, preferably WhatsApp me. I'm going to put my number in here, so if we do need to do some juggling, it's just easier. Okay, and second thing, Thabiso raised it, but I really need to emphasize it, and also how important it is. We very, very, very much need someone to help us coordinate people and take care of some of the little admin that's needed to make this project happen. You don't have to do it alone. You know, perhaps you can recruit others to support you in what you're doing, but we need someone to kind of spearhead the making happen side, because between Thabiso, Kate, and Gav and myself, we are overwhelmed on many, many fronts. I think for many people this year has been a lot, and as we wrap up, it's been a hell of a lot. But I know my life isn't going to be any more relaxed before like 8 months into next year. The amount of projects that are on my plate and need to happen. And I'm very much committed to assisting with the development side of this project. But we do need someone to start really being the, okay, we're going to make it happen person. So if anyone is keen to play that role, please, please, please step forward as much as possible. At the moment, really is just coordinating decisions, making sure the people, you know, who need partners are partnered up, etc. Just those basic decision-making things. Like it took us almost a month to really finalize positions and who's doing what, and we still don't have final clarity. There's still a few little loose ends, you know, because people don't always communicate always effectively, and you need to chase them. And then there's like little things. So Kate was going to set up the Telegram group, but then people's permissions make things challenging, and you know, some people aren't on the thing, and it's too much. It's too much because it's also not where she can turn her energy now. So we need people to do those things. We're going to do a little poll for the name. We need some help setting that up. It's not big things, but it's too much for us. We can't focus there. So to anyone you might know, anyone who wants to play that role, please. And we'll put out a call also to the email list. But if there's anyone here who's good at those things, knows the tools to shortcut, it would be immensely helpful. And we cannot make this happen without that person. And it will immediately fail at the beginning. So we are putting it out there. This is where we, you know, need someone else to come in and bring some energy.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I'm obviously echoing his sentiments and statements as well about needing that person. Look, what's going to happen is that person, you know, becomes a major face in the project. So it's a great opportunity, I think. We're all volunteering our time on this project. We're all volunteering each other's time, I think, as well on this project. And we want this thing to be a great success. That we would need, I like to refer it, I mean, myself and other director like to refer it as the shark in the room, someone who wants to make it happen. So I would love to engage with people who want to have that as their space. And you won't be alone. You won't be alone. You'll be supported the whole way through. So if you want to, think about it, have some time to think about it, but please do contact us. You have our emails, put yourself up for it. You'll definitely have us backing you the whole way. Right, so that's it from our side, from the idea of story design. We want to engage with people over here. Just if you have a spitball of an idea and you want to explore it into something that can be a story idea, and you want to just talk about it now, perfect. Otherwise, if you have any questions or queries as to what we've been talking about, if you want us to have a look at something again with regards to log lines or structure or anything like that, just here's an opportunity to do so. I'm looking forward to any one of the questions, anything that you guys thinking about, anything story related at all. Please have a moment.
There's a story that has been going around in my head for quite a long time, and it's and I've been alternating between it being a really broad, wide, huge thing or being tied into something really tiny. And the crux of the story is two friends. At this stage, I think they're both men, for two completely different reasons. One of them is terminally ill, and the other is not depressive, but is kind of this existentialist person who kind of thinks that, true freedom is deciding when I want to leave this party. I mean, if I want to, suicide isn't necessarily bad. So if I want to leave the party, I leave the party. So they have a suicide pact, and they commit suicide. They attempt to commit suicide very, very dramatically, extremely dramatic. And this doesn't need to be filmed, but the way they do it is they're both kayakers, and the way they do it is there is an incredibly amazing, superb, this is truth, grade 5 rapid above Ugrabis. But of course, nobody has ever paddled it, because once you've paddled it, you go down Ugrabis. So they're always everyone's always talked about wanting to paddle this rapid. Such a cool rapid. And these guys have decided, all the one's terminally ill, and the other one thinks, well, what the hell, and he kind of, so they do this, but one of them survives. And what is interesting for me, I think, is that the person who survives is in fact the terminally ill person. And in surviving, he ends up reconnecting with all the people around him and ends up, in fact, having an incredibly good death. Ultimately, I know it's kind of weird, but that's the idea that's in my head at the moment. And I've been playing with this for a long time. I don't know, any comments, any ideas, any advice?
Well, I'll say it's very interesting. It's a nice dark comedy, I would think. I think it's actually quite ironic, which is very nice. The irony of it is the most appealing part of it. The problem with the story, unfortunately, and fortunately, really, is because it's such a one moment. It hinges on that one moment of the terminally ill person survives, and then has to then is reconnecting with the world at the right time. As they're about to pass. I'm wondering if there is an expression of this terminally ill person actually not being connected to the world, actually being someone who is not communicating with their friends, their family members, and wants to just die. And this person that they're with, this person who's quite for euthanasia, is, the only person they're engaging with. I don't know, maybe it's a forced situation. Maybe there was a lockdown element to it. I asked the question, are we seeing a growth happen? Is the terminally ill person someone who's quite angry with the world, with what's happened to them, the fact that they've now been set up on this no-go path, and they're really bitter about the world. And this weird, funny, and bitter, ironic situation that occurs, yeah, maybe the friend dies, but it's still funny. I mean, it's still funny in a dark British way. That is the thing that they need to reconnect with the world. That if you exploring that, expressing that is my only concern for you. But I would think this is a nice story. I don't think it's 22 minutes long. I do think it's a much bigger film. I do think that you do need that set piece. that set piece of the rapids, going down the rapids. I think it's a big scene. I think it's definitely the midpoint or whatever of the film. And I think you not doing that would be cheating the film of its magic. But I do think it's an interesting idea. I think that is something to be there. I would just ask yourself the questions, okay, whose story is it? Maybe it's both of their story. Maybe do you have names for the characters?
I don't have names for the characters, but the thing that I haven't mentioned is that the character who's not terminally ill is actually kind of he's going through kind of quite a traumatic thing, in the sense that he's struggling, or they, as a couple, he and his wife are struggling to have a child, and he doesn't particularly want to have a child, and she desperately wants to have a child. So she is kind of forcing him into kind of doing this IVF. And I almost had this vision of the whole thing starting with him kind of like watching this porn, trying desperately to masturbate into this cup, and he just like, he cannot actually get himself motivated, because he doesn't really want, he considers this whole aspect of IVF as to being like disgusting. If evolutionarily we can't have a child, then we're not meant to have a child. So there's that whole thing. So from going to being forced to reproduce, he kind of goes the opposite direction and says, what is this obsession that we have with reproduction, with life, with survival, like, and kind of turns that on its head. I don't know. That's kind of what.
Can I just ask you a couple of questions? Because I mean, I love the idea very much. I like to be, so I'm kind of wondering about the set piece with the river as a necessary thing, and I'm just kind of curious. How do you see? Where do you see most of the story sort of playing out? And who is the focus?
That's kind of what I'm struggling with. I've kind of thought about having almost a campfire scene of kind of two flashbacks, of going to a campfire scene of a number of kayakers discussing things in one and then another one going to the post event where there's either there's a news thing that two people went down Hrabis and one survived, and you don't necessarily know which one it is, but you know that these two guys went down, and it's discussions of what happens afterwards in hospital. I don't know. I haven't.
Okay. I'm with you. So,
or even just the two widows. It might actually, the whole thing might actually take place between the two widows. I don't know.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, and this is a great question for story design, because these are exactly the things. Like, can one tell a story like this without the rapid? Which is obviously a beautiful key. If one could, it would be amazing, but probably can't. So, especially on the low budget, etc. But I think what you're talking about are all possibilities. I mean, essentially, what I really, really like about this is it's that question of the value of life and what makes it really worthwhile and worth living. And all the elements speak to that. So, should I bring life into the world? Is immediately, that big question. If that characters, the characters will I don't mind going down. It's a beautiful story that you can tell about people's relationships, like when is life really worthwhile. And certainly in COVID times, it's something that people are asking. I don't know if you know, like the stats on the suicides over COVID, it went like way up the roof. There's more suicides than COVID deaths by a long way, but it really escalated because once society shut down and once people were basically not given permission to live as humans, but it's just kind of work essentials, don't be isolated, don't hug, all of the stuff, people are like, well, checking out, I don't want to be part of it. So I think you do have a very, very, very powerful possibility. And then it will get down to that question, how to tell the story. But I see Kate has maybe an idea for you, so I'll pass it over.
Hi, Jen. So it's a very powerful story, but at this point, it doesn't fit the parameters of what the project is about. So if you're wanting it to fit, if you're wanting it under this particular project call, that you need to scale the story down, and because it's about being in a set location and under lockdown restrictions. So that's sort of the parameters of this particular project. So I'm just kind of like reining it back here to remember where we're at with this project. But the themes of what you're exploring could definitely be explored with the crux of your story could definitely be explored within the parameters of the project. But do you want to sacrifice your story for the parameters of this project? Because it is a very powerful story.
I don't know, but I've been struggling to find a way of of putting it together for a long time. It's a story that I've been working on for a very long time, and I do go from really broad to very narrow. So I have kind of said, well, maybe if I were to bring it right down, and I have considered that, but I can't quite see how. I do believe it is possible to do it without actually filming two kayaks going over Ograbis, which could get expensive, especially with sand parks. But yeah, so I do believe that it is possible to do that. But I'm kind of, I don't know. I mean, I've kind of written the first part of how I've actually written the guy's suicide note already, which kind of starts off quite how he just sort of stands there and says, yeah, he's kind of screaming into the void, and he's tired of screaming into the void, and he's decided to just actually go into the void. You know, and instead of having it shouting back like Nietzsche, it will shout back to him with joy. And I don't know, it's like it's odd, but I kind of think a part of me thinks it could be small and tight.
It can be. So I just really want to emphasize this. So one, also just to talk about those parameters, because it's not, I didn't at any point specify it needs to be locked down. It's just COVID craziness, but 80% has to be one location. So it happens within the the framework of these things, but it could be 80%, on the banks of a river, or, you imply that there's a river. If you have an easy access to something that you can cheat. But, I do think there is a way to do it, but again, you're going to have to really find out, who your characters are, because, essentially it is them processing, their desire for life and their relationship to it. And, you can use, another as a foil if there's, if it's the lady, I mean, that image of, like there's almost a three-hander, I guess I see the guy who's masturbating at his computer, who doesn't really want to bring life into the world because he wants to check out of it. The other, his lady, who really is very committed to, wanting something else in her life, a child, and perhaps in the context of this theme, is looking to fill a void with a child, potentially, but just thematically. But then there's, the terminally ill guy. And in that sense, there's like three characters and dynamics. And essentially, the objective partly might be, it might be a passive protagonist. And the objective is the guy wants to commit suicide and he wants his friend to come do it with him. And, the decision to say yes is perhaps your climax. And the conclusion, which I guess would happen as a news thing, could be the lady sitting watching the TV. And, we hear the story about them doing what they said they would do. So, it could be the plotting and the back and forward, and, the will I say yes to do that with you? And then, having some sense of what that means for the lady left behind, who might also then be pregnant, perhaps in the backstory. I don't know, it's these things. And then what's that child coming into,
Yeah.
So there's definitely ways to do it, but yeah, as Kate's saying, to fit it into the parameters would be challenging. I'm totally with Thabiso, like if you're going to do this at some point, it'd be amazing to check them down the river, but it's not necessary. You can tell the story. It's just, as he says, like, is that the story you want to tell now? Or would you like to hang on to it? Because it is a great story, but I'm sure you've got many great stories if you've got one, knowing you.
No, there are a million stories. There are a million stories, but
so Jen,
making them.
Sorry,
happen.
Jen, I just wanted to. I'm sorry, because we are actually almost running out of time, but I actually wanted to leave you with just a couple of questions to ask yourself, which might help you with the figuring out where the story should go, whose story is it, and if it is going to be a 22-minute or something much larger in a feature form. Look, you have to ask yourself the question: whose story is it? If you are going to bring it into a 22-minute, you've got a lot of possibilities with regards to telling a story about someone in that world. It could be the terminally ill friend, it could be the friend who wants to commit suicide, it could be the wives of them, it could be a post the event happening. Now these two wives have to deal with the situation, but you have to interrogate that for yourself, and you have to find the one that feels right. You have to find the story that feels right. And don't be afraid of exploring a story, or at least a point of view of a story that's different from yours. Just because you are someone who grew up the way you grew up doesn't mean that you can't explore the story from another person's perspective, you know? So the idea that's there is if you find yourself in a position of finding a story and a who story that feels just right enough to be told in a small story, then yes, I would then attach the 22 minutes to it to try to find the best way of, you know, telling the story the best way you can. But if you find yourself in a situation where, hell, you liked the story of perhaps the terminally ill guy, you like that aspect where, you know, he survived and what happens, you know, did he learn a lesson? What was the lesson? You know, then comes to the question, what is it that you're trying to say? You know, what is your fundamental worldview about this? That worldview is the thing that should help you address the kind of story you want to explore this in. What are you trying to say about this? What are you trying to say about suicide? What are you trying to say about those who are terminally ill? Do they have a right to life? Do they have a right to continuing life? What are you trying to say about the pregnancy story? Is it something that the person should be forced to be a sperm donor to a pregnancy against their will? These are the questions you must ask yourself. What are you trying to say? What is the worldview? So now I would say, in addition to that, ask yourself this question, and it's a very interesting question, I hope. This terminally ill patient, right? Why don't you give that person the story of the wife who wants to have a child? Because now you've got someone who knows they're not going to be there for their child growing up. And that is their biggest qualm about not giving their wife a child. That maybe perhaps this whole adventure, this whole thing reawakens this possibility of, you know, continuing some form of existence or whatever. Maybe that's the dilemma he's dealing with. Maybe that's the angry thing that he's been fighting with, because his chance at, you know, having this life has been taken away from him. But maybe perhaps the story is him coming to terms with that. Yes, he might not continue, but perhaps giving his wife something to continue with is the story. You know, these are the things that I want you to question and interrogate for yourself. I personally think that it's a beautiful story to be explored in a much bigger sense. And it could be that it's a small 90-minute film, a small 120-minute film, or a big 22-minute film. You know, it could be, these are the things that I want you to explore, but you got to find something that speaks to you instinctually. And once you have that and it irons out with your worldview as to what you want to say about these issues, then you have the possibilities. And the reason why I mentioned those three worldviews is because you should be able to, from saying, okay, I want to say this about pregnancy, I want to say this about suicide, I want to say this about terminal ill, you might find your 22-minute story in any specific one of those. And you want to say 22 minutes of that, nothing else. So these are the things that I would like you to explore. It could be that this is just one story idea and you have 3 others that you'd like to make into short films. That could be a cool thing as well. And then you go on a much longer journey with exploring this 90 to 120-minute long film. I hope what I'm saying makes sense to you, and I hope that it's opening up the possibilities for you as well.
Yeah, it does. It's thanks.
Okay, so I'm just going to, hi Richard, hi, how are you doing? I just wanted to read out what he's saying over here. There's one fundamental building block that has not been discussed, and that is premise. Yeah, so look, I mean, you mentioned the takeaway, and that's, you know, the idea that I'm speaking about, which is, you know, what are you trying to say? But in terms of premise, I'm going to actually add a technical aspect to that. You know, whenever you think of like story ideas, you should ask yourself the question, what if? You know, what if I had the power to change my life by getting money? Or what if I had the power of changing my life by going back into the past and undoing one event? Or what if I have the power of this? Or what if this person was confronted with this situation and they needed to figure out how to deal with it? That what if is a very powerful motivator for plot, a very powerful motivator for the genesis of the idea as well. And generally we call that the premise, what if, the scenario, right? And you'll find that in writing for books, in writing for stage, in writing for anything. So when you're thinking about your story ideas, please do attach that what if question, that what if idea. But you know, another thing is that Richard has mentioned, why do you want to tell this story? What do you want the audience to discuss in their car around? That's really important. That's the most important reason for you telling a story. And that conviction should have come through in your life experience, I think. I mean, all of us are here who are storytellers. We're doing something quite crazy. We believe that we have something to say and we want to say something. So that exploration of what you want to say is something that you should be the conviction of that should be something you explore in each and every one of your stories. So these are some of the questions you should be asking yourself, because believe me, these are the questions that we would like to ask you. We would like to engage with you. I'm not saying that these are make or break questions, because we just want to know why you want to tell the story. And once you do know why you want to tell the story, nothing's going to get in the way. And these limitations of the project are going to be opportunities for you to express very beautiful things. Yeah, that's me talking about what Richard says. I just want to speak to what Vicky said. Hi, Vicky. My story is about a family of 4 who are locked down in a shack. I'm thinking you're saying shack, right? A single woman, 2 brothers, and a teenage girl. They're all trying to bring food on a table in their own way. I am unable to talk because of the noise in the background. Okay, so Vicky, you've addressed a one location idea, but with a very big problem, a very big situation. So I would think if you wanted to do it in, they need food on the table right there and then, that day itself, and they're all fighting about how to do it. And then they all have to come to a conclusion as to how they're going to do it. Maybe that's an angle to the story you'd want to explore. I'm thinking that, it's a really nice one location story idea, but be careful of it going to a much, much larger idea and not really answering anything in that time period you want to tell your story in. So I would look at it like that. Even though you have a family of 4, maybe they're all protagonists, maybe they're all antagonists to each other. So you got to find out, and you have to do very hard work of finding out for every one of those 4, what is it they want? I mean, they all want to eat food, but all of them really want to be the one to get that done. All of them really want to be the person that has the right solution. And why do they all want to individually be the person that comes with the right solution? And perhaps that's the fight that's happening in that room.
Can I also just very quickly add, because we are out of time now. So Vicky, this is where I think it's worth having a discussion with you, because obviously we can give you some ideas, but we need to kind of elicit what your story really is. So please do look to also make an appointment with me. But you've got one major challenge also in the concept, which is if they are locked down and their objective is food, then how do they satisfy that if they are stuck in the shack? Because presumably, unless there's food there, what can they do to achieve the objective? That'll be your main challenge. So if it becomes a question of life, and do I now break the lockdown, sneak out and go get food because otherwise we have none, and it's worth doing, and maybe some feel that they shouldn't and someone does, or that'll be the dilemma. But that is that's a major conceptual challenge. So how you solve that challenge will be a lot of how your story unfolds, if you can solve it. Or it might be that a better idea is necessary, because that's going to be a big challenge to solve. But that's where I would love to talk to you, because I'm sure you have thought about it, and there is something there which I would try and figure out with you. But that is our time, I think, for today.
And actually we just missed Lauren. Sorry, Lauren, if you're watching the recording of this, hi and bye. Thanks for coming through. Thanks everyone. I know we had almost no time really to explore what your thoughts and feelings are about this topic, and also what some of your ideas. I really do take Gavin up on that opportunity to offer. I'm going to try and make myself available as well to participate in the sessions if Gavin, if you're comfortable with that. But I think that I really would love to hear from everyone. Really would love to hear what your stories are, and then unpacking them. Look, my most important thing is to help you make your film. And if we can help you make your film by asking these questions, by providing some kind of direction and providing some kind of interrogation for your own self, for your own method, and finding your own story and worldview, then we've done our job. That's what I think. Okay, guys, I see everyone saying signing off. I'll see you guys sometime soon, hopefully. Enjoy the December break. Have fun, stay safe, and please keep healthy.
Thank you, Thabiso. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, everybody. All the best with simmering the ideas.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm going to sign this off.
And finally, thank you, bye.
Yeah.